Okay, so we are ready to start installing our vinyl siding on this side of the wall here. Corner posts are set. Our J-trim is set. Again, our window already has J-trim that came with it from the manufacturer, so that's good to go. And all of our studs are laid out. So basically, again, just to reiterate, this starter strip is very important. That allows us to be able to snap in this first row here. That way our first sheet of siding here doesn't flap in the wind. So basically, this part is pretty straightforward. All you got to do is measure from the inside of your J-trim on one side to the inside of the J-trim on the other side. So we'll go ahead and get a measurement here. And it looks like we have 95. So from inside of the J-trim to inside of the J-trim tight, we have 95 inches. So again, this is vinyl siding. So we don't want to install it tight into our corner here. We have to allow for it to expand and contract. So every manufacturer has its different recommendations of how much space you should leave between the siding and the inside of the J-trim. And for this manufacturer, they recommended a 1/2 inch. And that's not a 1/2 inch on both sides. That's leaving a 1/4 inch on this side and leaving a 1/4 inch on the other side. So if we have 95 inches tight, we're gonna cut our siding to 94 1/2. And that's what we'll go ahead and do right now. So we'll just flip our siding over here, hook onto the end, and come out to 94 inches. 94 1/2. Make a mark, and then go ahead and square a line off here. And then you can go ahead and just cut this with tin snips. So this stuff cuts pretty easily. You can cut this with a circular saw. If you go get basically they're called like ferrous metal bits. They work really well for vinyl siding. It's just a really fine-toothed blade, and you can make a cross-cut sled to be able to cut a whole bunch of sheets at once. But if you have a small job, tin snips will do just fine. So this is the nice reason for J-trim. You want to try to do a somewhat nice job of cutting, but obviously it's not going to be as nice as a factory edge. There's some rough edges there, but because we have this J-trim, we can hide it behind these edges here. So it'll sit nice and tight and our edges are hidden. So what we can do is we can go ahead, come down to the bottom here, and I should mention before we install this, each piece of siding behind it has this little J here, and what that does is it will, this little part here will click into the bottom of that J-trim, and then every piece also has another, the starter strip. Every piece basically has another starter strip on the top of it for the next piece to click into. So that's what we're gonna do right here to start with. So we're just gonna come down here and get this piece clicked into place. And you wanna get it behind both pieces of J-trim, or corner trim here. And you just want to snap that up into place. Okay, so we're firmly in place here. And now before we nail this off, you can see that this piece of siding here is able to move back and forth. And that's the whole purpose of cutting it that 1/2 inch short. so we can have that 1/4 inch of space on both ends. So we don't want to shove it all the way to one side and nail it. Basically, we want to shove it tight and then bring it back half that distance. And then we're ready to install our first nail. So again, we want to look at where all of our studs are and come to the closest hole. And then we want to get our nail as close to the center of that hole as possible, still hitting that stud. And we'll just drive that nail just so it's touching. So if you can see, our sidings can still move with that nail in place there. And that's exactly what we want. It's tight enough to hold it to the wall, but still loose enough to be able to move. So we'll go ahead and nail off every stud here. All right, so we got our first piece nailed off here. I'm gonna go ahead and take a few measurements. One right at the top of this piece, it should be pretty close to 94.5 or 95.5, whatever we had. Then I'm gonna come up to the middle here, double check, just to make sure to see if our corner posts are perfectly plumb, or maybe they're hanging out or hanging in a little bit. And then I'm gonna go ahead and pre-cut a few pieces so we can just keep going all the way up until we get to the window here. So I'll go ahead and get those pieces cut. Okay, so we got all of our pieces pre-cut up to our window here. I'm gonna go ahead and install another one here. So again, this piece that we just installed basically has another starter strip already on it. It's a nice thing about vinyl siding, you just pretty much keep going. So we'll get it tucked in behind both points, get it underneath that ledge, and then you want to push up, make sure that it's nice and tight in there. This siding seems to be going in pretty nice. You can definitely tell that it's clicked in there. But when you are continuing on with siding, especially when it has a loose joint like that, these pieces of vinyl siding basically act like an accordion. So you can see that I can push up here and basically put pressure on there. I know that it's nice and tight, but I can also pull this up another 1/4 inch. So what you want to do is whenever you have siding that's just a little bit loose like that, one, make sure that it's completely snapped into place down there. But then you just want to bring it up so it's tight on the bottom, and then secure it in place with a nail. You don't want to pull it up anymore because you're going to have some pieces that are tight, some pieces that are loose, and then some pieces that are right on. And the reason why you don't want to put any extra force on that is because let's say we get to a point where we're like working around a window here. On this side, maybe we pull all those pieces super tight, but then on this side, maybe we don't do as good of a job and maybe they're a little bit too loose. When we get to the top of that window, they're not gonna match up, and then it's just not gonna look as well. So if you just bring it up so it's just touching, wherever it lands, put a nail, it'll go a lot easier for you. And where you're really gonna notice it is when you start going around a corner. If you take your time to just lift it up and wherever it lands, pop a nail. When you end up coming around the corner and you do that same technique, your corners are gonna match up a lot nicer, and you won't have to do as much work to make them match up. So each piece, just lift it up, wherever it lands, put a nail. And then again, every stud gets a nail. All right, so it's really nice to be able to put one solid piece all the way along a side of a wall if it's possible. If you have, let's say, like a 40-foot wall. These pieces come in 12-foot lengths, so you're gonna have to splice them together, and they are able to do that. If you can work it out to where the pieces that you cut off you can use in other places, that's the way to do it. If you can get away with not putting any seams in the wall, go ahead and do it. That's actually what I'm gonna do here. With all the pieces that I cut off, so I have an 8-foot section here, I have a 4-foot section left over. That's gonna work pretty well next to these windows here without much waste. So I'm gonna save all these cutoffs that we have to be able to use for this window and not have too much waste. But if you were to use these, you can. Basically what you want to try to do is make sure that you have your factory edge towards your wall. So I have a cut edge here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and install this. Put my cut edge behind my J-trim here. Snap it up into place. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, you can see this starter strip for the next piece is cut back a little bit. That allows you to run another piece up over this and overlap it. So I'm gonna go ahead and push this piece all the way into the edge and then bring it back my 1/4 inch so I know that's where it's gonna sit. And then I'm gonna take a measurement from behind my J-trim here. I'm gonna measure onto this piece overlapping. So tight, I have 41 inches. So I would like my 1/4 inch between my starter strip on this piece here and my 1/4 inch over there. So I'm going to subtract my 1/2 inch again. And then I'll take another piece. And then I should say, whatever your next piece is, you want to make sure that you have a factory edge. I don't have a factory edge available. But what you would do is you would then put it or overlap it behind this piece, snap it into place, and then you'd have a nice clean seam here with your pieces. So then the only thing to kind of mention is if you have to seam another piece above it, you don't want to line your seams up. You'd want to put your seam at least 2 feet away and kind of make your seams random. So if you've ever kind of driven by a house that has vinyl siding on it, and you've kind of seen like people that cut a seam and they place it right over a stud. So each row, there's a seam here, seam here, seam here. It's really, really noticeable, and you can tell that they've done that. So what you try to do is, if you have to do seams, is you just make them really random. So you can put one here, then maybe you'd put one over here, then you'd put one over here, and then your seams don't line up at all, and it just looks like it's a neater job. One final comment about seams. If you kind of think ahead a little bit and kind of just think about aesthetics, whenever you make a seam, you want to try to overlap away from the road. So let's say this is the front of our house and we have a road coming along the front of the house. What you want to try to do is when you overlap, you'd want your front piece to overlap your back piece. That way your seam here is hidden from the road. So you're looking at it in this direction, you can't see that seam because it's going away from the road. If you were to overlap it in the opposite direction, now you basically have created this black line that you can see, and it's just a lot more noticeable from the road. So wherever you have high traffic, like a road or a sidewalk, or if you're like entertaining in your backyard, you just want to try to have your seams go away from you from the place where there's most traffic, like a road or a sidewalk. So just kind of keep that in mind whenever doing your seams. So again, I'm not gonna put seams here because I can use all my cutoffs up by this window here. So I have the rest of my pre-cut pieces. I'm gonna go ahead and put them into place and install them up to the window. And then we'll come back when I get to the window here to install or show you how to cut around a window. So we'll go ahead and get these installed.